Welcome to a new settlement series. This town will be called Greenfield, and like my previous towns, the goal is to build a stable and self-sustaining economy from the ground up. In the New Haven series, we explored industries such as iron production and high processing, focusing on the industrial side of the town's economy. Greenfield will take a different direction. In this series, we'll be focusing primarily on the farming industry, building an agricultural foundation that can support the town as it grows. I'm also skipping the very beginning of the town layout in this video. If you're interested in seeing how I plan and structure a settlement from scratch, I recommend watching the New Haven series, especially the episode titled No More Loans. In that episode, one go into much more detail about planning, early finances, and building a stable foundation for the town. For Greenfield, we'll jump ahead to the point where that groundwork has already been established so we can focus on developing the farming economy and expanding the settlement. With that in place, let's begin building Greenfield. One thing I noticed later, but didn't correct right away, was the way I set up the crop rotation for these first farm fields. In this layout, I ended up planting 2 fields of buckwheat and 2 fields of potatoes in the same year. It's not a major problem, but it can create an issue with storage. Potatoes are perishable, so if you produce more than the town can consume in that year, some of them may spoil before they can be used. Buckwheat, on the other hand, does not spoil, so it's generally safer to produce in larger quantities. Later on, I adjusted the crop balance, but at this point in the town's development, the difference isn't significant enough to cause serious problems. In this build, I decided to keep the shops close to the trading post and the farms. The main reason for this is to reduce the time spent transporting materials. By keeping these buildings close together, workers don't have to travel as far when moving goods between production, storage, and trade. Over time, those small time savings can make a noticeable difference in how efficiently the town operates. It's a simple layout choice, but one that helps keep the early economy running smoothly as the settlement grows. At this point, I decided to try fishing as an early industry for the town. After testing it for a while, I found that in the early stages of development, fishing is not always the best option. Most of the workers ended up spending a lot of their time sitting idle while waiting for materials to make nets. I tried pulling the nets from the warehouse, but that created another problem. In this town, I'm also planning to run textile production and shoe manufacturing, which means thread is already needed for those industries. Because of that, thread becomes a limited resource early on, and the fishing operation ends up competing with other industries for the same materials. At this stage of the town's development, that makes fishing less efficient than it might appear at first. Because of those issues, I removed the buildings later and retested the fish production. Rather than forcing the industry to work in this location, the better option is to relocate it later to a branch of the river where it will fit more naturally into the town's layout. That will also give the settlement more time to develop the supporting industries, so materials like thread are more readily available. For the early stages of Greenfield, it makes more sense to keep the focus on farming and basic resource production and bring fishing in later once the town is better established. After things began to stabilize a bit, I finally added an oil workshop to the town. This allows us to start processing sunflower into sunflower oil, which becomes another useful food source as the settlement grows. One advantage of sunflower oil is that it does not spoil, making it a good option for long-term food storage. It's also in demand on the market, which makes it a valuable product for trade later on. Another advantage of the oil workshop is that it can process several different types of oil. So as the town develops and new crops become available, this building can continue to support multiple parts of the farming economy. At this stage, the settlement finally has enough stability to support an industry like this without creating shortages elsewhere. After the town stabilized again, I decided it was time to add a second farm. Expanding the farming capacity helps ensure the settlement has a steady supply of crops, while also supporting the industries that depend on them. As Greenfield grows, increasing agricultural production becomes one of the most important steps in maintaining a stable economy. One challenge with a town at this stage is that a lot of time passes between major changes. After making adjustments to production and layout, the settlement needs time for resources to move through the system and for the workforce to settle into their new roles. During this period, there was quite a bit of waiting, planning, and small adjustments. So much of that downtime has been shortened here to keep the video moving. What really matters is watching how the town gradually stabilizes and begins to grow. One of the main goals in this video is to test a town design that can operate without taking any loans. Loans can help a town grow quickly, but they also create financial pressure early on. By avoiding loans, the town has to develop more slowly and rely entirely on its own production and trade to support expansion. The idea here is to build an economy that can sustain itself from the beginning, with farming and basic industries providing the resources needed for growth. This approach requires a bit more patience, but if the design works, the town should be able to expand without relying on borrowed money. After things settled again, I went ahead and added a third farm. At this point, the town's food production and basic industries were stable enough to support another expansion in agriculture. Since the goal of Greenfield is to build a town centered around the farming industry, increasing the number of farms is an important step in developing the local economy. Each new farm increases the amount of crops available not only for food consumption, but also for the industries that process those crops into other products. With the third farm in place, Greenfield's agricultural base begins to take shape. With the farms continuing to expand, the town now needs more workers to keep everything running efficiently. To support that growth, it's time to add some additional housing. However, I try not to overpopulate the town too quickly. Expanding the population faster than the economy can support can create shortages in food, jobs, and resources. So the goal here is to increase housing gradually, adding just enough workers to support the new farms and industries without putting too much strain on the settlement. Keeping that balance helps the town grow in a stable and controlled way. As I mentioned earlier, the fishing operation wasn't working out very well at this stage of the town's development. Because of the material shortages and the amount of time workers were spending waiting for nets, the industry simply wasn't operating efficiently. Rather than continuing to force it to work, I decided it would be better to remove the fishing operation for now and revisit the idea later when the town has more resources available. So at this point, I chose to demolish the boatyard and the fishing building and start looking at other industries that would fit better with the current stage of Greenfield's development. One thing to keep in mind when demolishing buildings is that they have to be completely emptied first. In this case, I made a small mistake. I removed the stored wood from the boatyard, but I forgot to also remove the labor workforce assigned to the building. Because the workers were still assigned, they simply brought more wood back and restocked the boatyard. So before demolishing a building, make sure to remove all workers and labor assignments first. Otherwise, they may continue supplying materials and prevent the building from being cleared. Now that the farms are producing wheat, it makes sense to start processing it into something more useful. So at this point, I decided to place a few windmills so we can begin producing flour. Turning wheat into flour adds another step to the farming economy and allows the town to start developing additional food production later on. It's another small step in building a more complete agricultural supply chain for Greenfield. With the boatyard and fishing building now removed, that part of the riverfront opened up some new possibilities for development. So I decided to build a bridge across the river to expand the area available for farming and livestock. On the other side, I began setting up chicken coops, which will give the town another steady food source. Adding livestock alongside crop farming helps diversify the food supply and strengthens the overall agricultural base of the settlement. One important thing to remember when starting a chicken coop is to make sure it already has food and water available before buying the chickens. If the coop isn't stocked first, the animals can end up without supplies right away, which can cause problems with production. To make this easier, it also helps to place a water platform close to the coops, so workers don't have to travel long distances to supply water. And, as I mentioned in a previous video, it's also important to make sure your wells are not assigned for production use. If wells are used for production, they can eventually drain completely, which can create water shortages for the town. Keeping the water supply managed properly helps the livestock operations run smoothly and efficiently. To start the livestock operation, I ordered 26 chickens and divided them between the 4 coops. It will take a little time before we can begin butchering chickens, because each coop can hold up to 30 birds. Until the population grows closer to that limit, the chickens will continue reproducing and building up the flock. In the meantime, the coops will already begin producing eggs, which gives the town another useful food source. So for now, the goal is to let the flocks grow, and once the population increases, we'll be able to start producing meat as well. Around this time, the town passed an important milestone. Greenfield reached a population of 100 people. That's a good sign that the settlement is starting to stabilize and that the economy is supporting the population growth. With more workers available, the farms and industries can operate more consistently, which helps keep the town moving forward. At this point, I decided to relocate the chapel. Originally, it was placed near the center of the town, but I realized that area would be better used for housing as the population continues to grow. So I moved the chapel next to the city hall, which keeps the administrative buildings together while freeing up valuable space in the middle of the settlement. This also helps keep the central area focused on residential development, which will be important as Greenfield continues expanding. With the chapel removed from the center of town, I was able to lay out 6 new homes in that area. I also added additional houses along the river and anywhere else there was available space, gradually expanding the residential areas of the settlement. For this stage of development, I decided to temporarily disable migration. Doing this gives me more control over the town's population growth while I prepare to expand the farming industry again. The next step will be to add a 4th farm, and managing migration carefully helps ensure the town has the workers it needs without growing faster than the economy can support. When I hired more workers for the farms, something interesting happened. Several of the workers who had been taking care of the chickens left their jobs at the coops and moved over to the farm work instead. That meant I had to quickly reassign workers back to the chicken coops so the livestock wouldn't be left unattended. Fortunately, chickens can sustain themselves for a short time as long as they still have feed and water available, which give you a little time to correct the problem. But it's still important to keep an eye on job assignments, because workers will often move to new positions when additional jobs become available. Another issue I started running into was soil nutrients becoming exhausted, which caused some of the crop rotations to get out of balance. When the nutrients drop too low, the fields can no longer support the crop that was originally planned, so I had to keep adjusting the crops to compensate. It's not ideal, but in the early stages of development, the priority is simply keeping the farms producing something. Eventually, I plan to rework the rotations and balance the soil nutrients properly. But for now, these adjustments keep the farms operating while the town continues to grow. One thing that makes this farming-focused map more challenging compared to an industrial setup is that many of the goods can spoil. In an industrial town, most products like iron or manufactured goods can be stored indefinitely, so there's less pressure to move them quickly. With farming, however, many of the resources, especially food products, will eventually spoil if they sit too long in storage. That means production, storage, and consumption all need to stay balanced. Otherwise, valuable resources can be lost. It adds another layer of planning to the town's economy and makes the farming approach a bit more challenging to manage. At this point, I added 3 windmills and also moved one of the existing windmills to a better location. The goal here is to increase flour production from the wheat being grown on the farms. Even though flour will eventually spoil, it's still worth producing because it allows the town to extract additional value from the wheat harvest. Rather than letting excess wheat sit unused, converting it into flour means we can still make use of the crop before it goes to waste. As the harvest season was coming to a close, I tried to bring in more laborers to help bring in the remaining crops. Unfortunately, there simply weren't enough workers available to cover all the fields in time. Because of that, several of the fields were lost before they could be harvested. That's one of the risks with farming. If the workforce isn't large enough during harvest season, some of the crops can be left in the fields and eventually lost. One of the challenges with the farming economy in this game is the way jobs tend to be divided between men and women. Many of the farm jobs end up being filled primarily by women, while some of the men remain unemployed. That can become a problem for the town's economy, because if the men in a household don't have steady employment, the household income drops and families can begin to struggle financially. So in the next episode, one plan to adjust some of the job assignments and have more of the men working in certain positions to help keep household income balanced. This isn't meant as a commentary on anything outside the game. It's simply how the employment system works here, and managing that balance is part of running the town successfully. In this episode, we focused on building the early foundation of Greenfield as a farming-based settlement. We began by establishing the first farms and quickly discovered that crop rotation and soil nutrients require constant attention. Some of the early fields fell out of rotation as nutrients were exhausted, which forced adjustments to the crops being planted. We also explored how layout decisions affect efficiency, placing shops close to the trading post and farms to reduce travel time for workers transporting goods. An early attempt at introducing fishing as an industry did not work well at this stage of development due to shortages of thread needed to produce fishing nets. Because that resource was already required for other industries, the fishing operation was removed for now and may be revisited later. As the town stabilized, we expanded the farming infrastructure by adding additional farms and increasing the number of windmills to begin producing flour from wheat. Even though flour eventually spoils, processing wheat into flour allows us to extract more value from the harvest. We also began developing livestock production by building chicken coops and stocking them with chickens. While it will take time before the population grows enough to support regular butchering, the coops immediately begin producing eggs, adding another food source for the town. To support the growing population, housing was expanded and migration was temporarily disabled so population growth could be controlled while preparing additional farms. Along the way, we encountered several typical farming challenges, including worker reassignment issues, shortages of labor during the harvest season, and the difficulty of keeping crops harvested before the season ends. We also reached an important milestone as Greenfield passed a population of 100 residents, showing that the town's economy is beginning to stabilize. Finally, we discussed one of the underlying challenges of a farming-focused economy in the game. Many of the goods produced in agriculture can spoil over time, which means production, storage, and consumption all need to stay balanced to avoid losing resources. Overall, this episode demonstrates the process of building a town that relies primarily on agriculture rather than heavy industry, while also testing whether the settlement can develop successfully without taking any loans. That will bring this episode of Greenfield to a close. In this video, we focused on developing the early farming economy, expanding the farms, introducing livestock, and working through some of the challenges that come with managing an agriculture-based settlement. If you enjoyed following the development of the town and the strategies behind building the economy, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.